Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Flair podcast. My name is James Carter, and I will be your host. This is the podcast where we talk about everything to do with the creative industry and the art world. And today, we are going to be talking about creative criticism and critique. This is a topic that I'm really interested in, and I thought could make quite an interesting episode. It's not a really long, talkative one. It's more just about creative criticism and critique in the art world, and like how it can go right, how it can go wrong, how it can really improve your work, but also how it can be a little bit detrimental to some people. I've set up the camera in a slightly different way today, and I'm not entirely sure if it works or not, but it's, give it a shot, why not? Anyway, on to what we should be talking about, which is criticism. No matter who you are in the art world or in the creative industry, you're always going to receive criticism and critiques, whether it be from an art critic or from just a casual person who's viewing your work. Everybody has a different opinion on your work and what work they like and what work should be viewable and enjoyed. For example, Damien Hirst's new work that he did about a big statue of a monster has received some really grave criticism from a lot of people, and most of them are normal people, just people who look at artwork but aren't necessarily involved in the art world, and some of them are from art critics. So it doesn't matter who you are, you're always going to receive criticism. But when you're very first starting out in the art world and stuff, you are going to receive some really harsh criticism. And it's very important to remember that these people don't really matter if they're being really harsh, but there's different types of criticism and ways to critique art and artwork and the creative process. When I first started drawing and painting and stuff, my artwork was horrible, as just I'm pretty sure everybody else's was when they first started. And I remember posting a lot of my work online and on social media, and I used to get an awful lot of not necessarily hate sort of comments, but a lot of people commenting, do this, do that, this is crap. But there's certain ways of criticizing somebody's work and somebody's art. If somebody online is just commented on one of your posts and says, this is bad, then that's not really criticism, that's just their opinion. You need to be aware of what criticism is, but also be able to take in constructive criticism. But that also means that people have to give you constructive criticism. And that really means that when somebody's giving you criticism on your work, they need to be telling you what is good about it, what is bad about it, but also how to improve it, sort of thing. But you need to be able to take that on board and really think about what you did right, what you did wrong, how you can improve it for the next time. And all of this criticism really does help in getting you to where you want to be faster. But if there are people that are just commenting on your posts saying this is bad, just ignore them. Their opinion is null and void. There are a lot of cases as well where people who are criticizing artwork aren't really meaning to criticize the artwork, but mostly to improve it and help it. But they do it in a different way. But they sometimes don't necessarily understand the work. And I am guilty of this, I will not lie. There have been numerous times in the past where we do group critiques and we look at critiquing other people's work and stuff. And there have quite often been a few bits of work that I've looked at and I just do not understand it. And I have a certain way of phrasing things, unfortunately, when I ask people about what does it mean, rather than going, I don't quite understand this. What does it mean? I will often go, what does this mean? What? Sort of thing. And I just, I seem to just naturally have a way of doing that. And I also have a naturally sarcastic tone, which doesn't exactly help me, does it? No. Anyway, I have become increasingly mindful of this. And so when I'm looking at other people's work and I genuinely like it, I just don't quite understand it, because a lot of artwork that I look at and I critique is conceptual and not exactly that sort of thing. I mean, that sort of work is a realistic portrait, and it's easier to critique, you might say, because it has a specific technique and style and a good idea of what it's meant to look like. Whereas with conceptual and contemporary art nowadays, there's not really a set way in what it should look like or be. which is why with conceptual works and stuff, you have to look at everything and really investigate everything, which I really enjoy, actually. I do enjoy investigating all these different avenues and sides to it, but there's a lot of times I just don't quite understand it. But I'm really keen to learn about how this person is wanting an audience to perceive this specific work. So I will ask a whole range of questions and then give my critique on what I think about the work. But we have a general rule of you can't just say that's bad. If you say that it's bad, you have to explain why. And you've got to explain exactly why you don't like this artwork, because it is your opinion. You can't just say the artwork is bad, because one other person might really like the artwork and enjoy it and sort of really see something different within it. But it is often also very clear when somebody is very defensive of their work and not so keen to take on criticism. And I think a lot of early and new beginner artists are very guilty of this, of when they receive criticism on their work. For example, a lot of people start out with art with doing realistic works. And when somebody comments on the work and says, oh, it's not great, blah, 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 quite often there's a very identifiable defense that basically makes them think, yeah, no, you don't know what you're really doing. And that is usually them retaliating and saying, that's just my style. This is how it's meant to turn out. I wasn't aiming for realistic work, but if you were aiming for a realistic work, then you are aiming for the realistic work. It's a very complicated thing, you might say, but there's a lot of ways of interpreting how somebody's viewing your work, but also the ways that you want people to interpret your work. Do I make any sense when I talk? Or I don't actually know anymore? You really wouldn't believe me that I genuinely study this sort of thing, would you? Nah. You know that on my bookshelf, just behind the camera and all the lights and stuff back there, I have umpteen number of books about art, art history, art techniques, art criticism. I have a book that's called How to Understand Art. It's a good book. And I've read every single one of those books multiple times. And yet it's still really, really hard to actually talk about art because it's so different for every single person. Art's a very complicated world. If you're going to get into the art world, you must make sure that you're able to take on criticism. If you're not able to take on criticism, you must be able to block out harsh critiques that are not helpful, but take on harsh critiques that are insightful and helpful. If somebody has turned around to you and said that your work is bad, then they give you no reason, then that is noteworthy to ignore. If somebody has turned around to you and given you advice on your work and said it might work better by doing blob or this thing, then you must take that on board. You don't necessarily have to do what they say, but you need to be able to have the ability to take on board what they're saying and what they're talking about. Because quite often, the most insightful critiques you will receive are from people that have been involved in the art world for a very long time and have seen people like you and me come and go, and they know what works and what doesn't work. So if somebody's offering you advice and critique on how to improve your work, I would 1,000% recommend that you take it on board. There is another thing around critiquing art and how to do it. How you should critique art does depend on the type of artwork that you're viewing or the person wants you to be critiquing. If somebody doesn't want you to critique their work, don't critique their work. Right? They're learning, they're trying to get through the process of it. And it's a very hard process of trying to learn how to do all these things that you might just know how to do. And by trying to help that person, you might come across as arrogant and obnoxious because you do know all this stuff about how to do it correctly, you might say. But that person, an individual, needs to go through this process of learning about it and evolving their work into something that is not molded by you, but is able to have your insight on it if needed. In college, when we used to do art critiques ages ago, I won't lie, I've always been a little bit like this of, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. And I genuinely do know how to do these things. And I've done them well and I've done them successfully. The problem is that I have a certain manner of putting across what I know in a certain style of phrasing where it comes across obnoxious, unfortunately. And I'm very aware of that, but I never mean it to be. And there was a time in college when we were doing a group critique on somebody's work. And the person who was having their work critiqued, I liked the work, I liked the idea, but they'd seen how I'd critiqued everybody else's work before that. And it wasn't harsh. I'm not genuinely a harsh person when critiquing it. I'll find a thread and I'll pull on that thread, not to dismantle their work and like make the foundations of their work crumble. But if that pulling on that certain thread leads to it, then I wouldn't say it's my fault. I would just think that there are, unfortunately, holes in what their work is and what they're trying to achieve. And more often than not, I managed to pull on that specific thread, unfortunately, which led to a lot of people not wanting their work critiqued by me. And that was a bit tricky sort of thing, because in my head and the way I view it, if somebody is good at doing that sort of thing, I want them to pull apart my work, because I don't want some flimsy bit of artwork that people are going to look at and just see, oh yeah, that's crap. In general, I would rather have a much stronger piece of artwork that everybody admires and likes and enjoys and really notices about it. And in college, I will admit, there's people don't really want their artwork critiqued when they're learning, because they are learning and they're learning how to do it. But I do believe that critiquing work is part of that. But this person basically threatened to throw a book at my head before I even opened my mouth to critique their work, which that was fun. There were some really good and great people on that course as well that sort of, they all used to ask for my sort of help and insight towards their work of what I thought about it, because I don't quite know how, but I just developed this sort of small reputation for being able to know these things, and just I would help people with their work. And genuinely, I wouldn't just sit there and do it for them. It would be, I think this could work, I think that could work. And every single person I helped did their work really well. I won't lie. Yes, that is my ego talking, because why not? I'm getting carried away with myself here now. I think I'll just end it here. I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to the Creative Flair podcast, and I hope you've enjoyed it. This one's been a bit different, and you also got to hear a little bit of my ego talking, which wasn't fun for anybody. Thank you very much again, and I hope you'll join us next week, where I will make sure I turn my ego off. Thank you very much, and goodbye.